Okay, so this is lecture two for the consecutive techniques course. We had a little bit of a technical glitch, so I believe you got an email or you figured it out on your own. You just went out and came back. We had just a technical problem. That's what we started. We're starting a little bit late. No worries. We'll finish at the same time, maybe 5 minutes later than usual. But I'll be able to catch up, so don't worry about that. So, having said that, let's just talk a little bit about what we have done so far in this class, because today we're going to start working with what we call apps. And those apps are actually very, very important. But for you to be able to understand the apps and to use it correctly, you need to have a good foundation of this particular material. And this material is basically as I told you last week, is the development of the iPhone itself, if you want to use that as an example. And you can't really run an app on a phone that you don't understand. You don't know where to press, whatever. So something similar happens here. If you don't understand what we discussed last week, if you have doubts about it, then clearly it will be detrimental to start adding apps to this phone, because then they won't work that well. So what we're going to do is we're going to look into what we did, kind of summarize this. We're not going to do a practice. We did several practices last week. Hopefully you watch the lecture again so that you have a better idea of that material. It's really important that you have a good foundation of what we discussed last week. That's why I suggested you watch the video again, which hopefully you did. So let's just summarize this with some different examples. So we said that to take notes using the consecutive mode, we're going to use a technique where each column corresponded to a participant doing an action, and the notes were taken from top to bottom and left to right. And one of the things that we did is, just to give you an example, we'll say, for example, John came to the US at the age of 19. Mary came to the US at the age of 17. So was a typical basic example where we assigned this column for John and this column for Mary. And you can see that we basically took notes from top to bottom. And then this will give us the sequence, and this will be the participants. We also look at that, and we also said that we should always have like a zero column here for anything that we didn't know where to put on which particular column here. So sometimes the segment starts like this. Let me show you. On September 3rd at 3 p.m. at the corner of First and Vermont, I was waiting for the bus with my friend Alex. Alex is 25. So you can see that in this example, when you hear on September 3rd, at 3 p.m. at the corner of First and Vermont, that's the number one here, by the way. Where do we put that when we hear that? We have no place of putting it. So that's why that goes into our zero column. Now, the number one, number two columns are columns associated with someone who was actually doing an action. So on September 3rd, at 3 p.m. at the corner of First and Vermont, I was waiting for the bus with Alex. And then I talk about Alex now. So I said, Alex is 25. And the fact that I mentioned Alex here doesn't mean I have to open any new column for Alex, because in this particular segment or sentence, it says, I was waiting for the bus with Alex. Alex is not doing anything. It's I was, right? So I'm the one doing this. It's like saying I went to Jose's house. Jose doesn't have to open another column here or anywhere, simply because Jose is what we call passive. It's not doing anything. It's just basically you're referring to his house. So that's kind of the, that's one of the things that we were discussing last week. Um, and actually, this particular um, introducing the zero column created some difficulties, I remember, last week for some of you. So I'm going to give you another example of the zero column. If I say, for example, last week on Wednesday at 9 p.m., John was, I don't know, at a restaurant located at the corner of First and Vermont. So here you can see this is my zero column, this is my number one. And that information that says last week on Wednesday at 9 p.m., when I hear it, where do I put that? I don't, usually you start putting things in a column once you identify it, right? See, here it says John was in a restaurant located at First and Vermont. So now if I say anything about John, I already have it identified here, so I write it below. But in this case, the sequence is in this direction from top to bottom. The first thing that you hear as the interpreter from the original is last week on Wednesday at 9 p.m. And that actually has to go to that zero column. So let me know if there is any questions on anything that I am saying right now, okay? Because it's very important that I feel comfortable that you know this material. I will continue, but if there's a question, please feel free to ask. Then we also look at the more realistic situations. We look at situations such as this. For example, John works in a restaurant and Mary works in a hospital. And here what we have is basically our first column, and we know this is number one, the zero is here. We haven't used it, we didn't need to use it. This is our second column. And what we do is we use what we call a linking clause or a connector or connecting clause. And that connecting clause is and you use the first letter of that. We could, for when, we could use W. For while, we can use W because. You can use the B, or usually we do BC. It's up to you, but you just basically, the first letter is what the rule calls for, or just an abbreviation. And in a way, this kind of flows by linking both clauses. And we did that. So I can say, for example, John works in a restaurant, Mary works in a hospital. John is 21 while Mary is 23. And that W refers to a connecting link or a connecting clause, which could be when or while. Obviously, John is 21 when, well, it could be John is 21 when Mary is 23. It's possible, but most likely this will be while. So would it help to draw vertical lines in advance to make it more clear? No. In fact, the vertical lines, if you already create this, I mean, maybe it helps at the beginning, but remember when you're taking notes, you just don't want to be drawing things before the notes begin, and it could be confusing. So it's up to you, really. Technically, I will tell you, in general, I will tell you not to draw them. But if you feel that helps you, please feel free to do that. Nobody's going to grade your notes. They're going to grade what you're saying, right? So you're using the notes for an aid to memory more than anything else. Now, here's the question that some people may have is, well, wait a minute, how do I know this is while instead of when? We have a question mark. How do I know? Well, this note taking is not a transcription of everything. That's clearly impossible to do. This note taking technique will also depend on your short-term memory. So you have to have short-term memory. We will talk about short-term memory today, and I think last week I gave you some practices on it. But the idea is that there has to be some level of short-term memory to be able to know whether this is while or when. Okay, so that's the main thing. Okay, very good. So there was another thing that we did last week, and that was, for example, if I had John works in a restaurant and Mary works in a hospital. And then what we wanted to do is join them. And we've said, for example, John and Mary, those two dots, and they were on the same line. And this is critical. Whenever you start using this type of apps, they have to, the app opens with a dot. And if there is a second dot, it means put these two together. So John and Mary, right? And the key is that you really open it with this dot. And then because it says John and Mary, we put another dot here. But what tells us that this is an app is the fact that we open with a dot. And on the same line, right? On the same line, you have something else. In this case, you have another dot. In a few minutes, you're going to see that you will have something else. So here's this John and Mary. So here's the opening. So we can say here's the opening of the app. So John and Mary, are good friends. And we also said you have to close the app. So that slash, that's the closing of the app. Okay. The question is whether you can use this to mean the same. I'm not sure where you would use that. I'm not sure, Fausto. I wouldn't make any changes at this point. Just do whatever I'm doing right now. Okay. So again, one dot opens an app, and then something else that goes here. Here is going to be another dot, which indicates join both of them, John and Mary in this case. And then you put whatever this belongs to both of them, and we have to remember to close the app. So here's the opening of our app. Here's the closing of our app. In a way, another way that we can look at it is if I were to kind of isolate this, it will be like that, right? That will be our complete app here. And what it says here is John and Mary are good friends, and I have to close it. And we say that you have to close it because now if the original refers to Mary, whatever I write down, let's say that it says John and Mary are good friends. Mary has one daughter and John has one son. If you don't close the app and you put one daughter in here, then when you read this, it says John and Mary are good friends who have a daughter together. I don't know. God knows, it changes. So you have to make sure that you close the app, which is another way of saying that you determined where this information that you're writing here, when it stops belonging to these two. So here it means, hey, wait a minute, whatever you write below, it belongs only to Mary now. But what I write between this dot and this slash here refers to these both in a way, based on this app. Mm-hmm. You can use and, that symbol, Daniel. Yes, you can use and like that if it's easier for you to draw. That's not a problem. See, the letter that you use here or the symbol or whatever that you use here, it's completely irrelevant. Whatever you can write faster. Okay, that's the bottom line. So, of course, if there is a question, please feel free to ask. Now, the other thing that we did see is that sometimes instead of writing things, you can actually look at some symbols, some drawings that are very, very helpful. For example, we have one drawing that denotes boundaries. They're quite important drawing, I should say, because we said that if we had something like this, if this is a place, a business, a house, this is kind of the main entrance. This is the rear exit or entrance. Okay. And we did not discuss this, but I'm going to discuss it shortly. We can also separate this into 4 different areas. Okay, so we can imagine 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you draw within that box, draw an H. Okay, and so here's still the main entrance. This is the rear portion. And this is going to be a bedroom. This is going to be another bedroom. This is going to be the living room in case of a house, of course. And this is going to be the kitchen slash dining room. So if it's a house and you see an H like that, that's the distribution, really. So I mean, it's not, it's an H that actually should close this, right? Should, yeah, like that. What we did see last week is just the entrance. And so we say, for example, John entered the 7-Eleven store at 3 p.m. That's how we will take notes for this. So this is something we saw. And we also, I don't recall if we actually saw dynamics within the box. I don't think we did. But, you know, we also knew that he left the store through the rear door, the 7-Eleven store through the rear door at maybe 3:15 p.m. So this ones became very handy, and then we're going to kind of add to it now and then start looking at apps. But this became very handy when we implemented it with the other approach. And so let's look at an example. If I say, for example, I was inside the 7-Eleven store at 3 p.m. when John walked into the 7-Eleven store through the main door with a gun. I decided to leave the store through the rear door at, I don't know, at 15 minutes later. So this, for example, and you can say, for example, but John remained in the 7-Eleven store for 25 minutes. I don't know, something to that effect. So when we analyze this, we can see now that instead of, so this will be sort of option one. What I wrote is will be the preferable option on the left. This is the one we like. That's why it has a check mark. But if you were to say all this here, look how many notes you had to take. I was inside the 7-Eleven store at 3 p.m. when John came into the store through the main door at with a gun. Okay, so you can see now, compare this with this and compare this with this. And you can easily see that the way to go is with these symbols, because if you do it this way, it's going to take a lot of time. And our goal, remember, is to always write as few notes as possible. Always the minimum writing. What you don't want to do is write a lot. So, let's see now a little bit more about, let's try to get better use of these boxes. I understand Azucena said that we did going inside and standing inside, outside. Right, you're right, Azucena. We also look at this example. This mean being outside, right? Yeah. So that would be, for example, this will be whoever. Let's say this is under I. So that means I was outside the 7-Eleven store. Okay, so that's what this means. Yeah, we did that as well. But what we didn't do, however, is make better use of that approach using boundaries. And you may say, well, how could you do this? Well, we have a way. I developed a way to actually do boundaries in terms of static boundaries or dynamic boundaries. When you look at this, for example, let's see. This is a static. It just tells you one moment in time. I was outside the store. This is static. I was inside the store. This is also static with some dynamics here because I was entering. This is leaving. But what we're going to learn now is that inside that box, you can put a lot more information that you can think of. Let me show you. All right. So here's my box. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So let's say that the original says, I entered the 7-Eleven store through the main door at 3 p.m. and went to the rear of the store and bought some beers. And then let's say 15 minutes later, okay, I came from the rear of the store with my beers, and I left through the main door after paying or whatever. So you can see here the dynamics of it. I entered the store and went there. Or another one, I entered the store and stayed in the store for a period of time. So here you could have like this. So for example, I entered the store at 3 p.m. through the main door and remain inside the store for 10 minutes. Okay. And then you may have something else that you can use with the drawings, and then maybe you have to draw it below. Well, at this point, there is a tip, there's a secret about this that makes it really good. So this is called dynamics. In other words, when you see that there are two arrows or one arrow and a dot or something that it goes 1, 2, at least 2, it could be more than that, 1, 2. So it's a two-step thing, that's called dynamic. When it's one-step thing, enter, that's static. Inside, static. Outside, static. Left through the rear door, static. So I could have a situation like this, for example. I was inside the store for about 10 minutes, and then I left the store through the main door and stayed outside for 5 minutes. This is what it says here. I originated here, so I was inside the store for 10 minutes, left through the main door, and stayed outside for 5 minutes. And if I want to make it even more complicated, and then I entered the store again and stayed inside for 5 minutes. So this is a very dynamic approach where you have one, the staying there is 10 minutes, that's one, leaving through the main door is 2, staying outside is 3, entering again is 4, and staying inside for 5 minutes is 5. So you have 5 dynamic events. You can do that, and that's going to save a lot of notes. Okay, so all these tips for you to reduce the amount of note taking. Because you may say, well, I prefer to take notes, but trust me, when you take notes, it's more difficult than when you see the drawing. Way more difficult. You might have noticed that already. Now, talking about this dynamic thing, you can have a situation like I entered the store at 3 p.m., stayed inside for 10 minutes, and left through the rear door at 3:10 p.m. That would be another use of a dynamic process within that boundary approach. And of course, if this is a store, now if we're talking about a house, and we kind of always draw this H within that house, you could have a lot of more dynamic elements here. So you can say, for example, I entered my house at 3 p.m. and stayed in the living room for about 15 minutes. Then I went to my bedroom and stayed there for about 20 minutes. Finally, I went to the kitchen and stayed there about 10 minutes, and then I left through the rear door at 3:50 p.m. That's a quite dynamic one. And what makes it even more beautiful here is that I don't have to write living room. I don't have to write bedroom. I don't have to write kitchen. Because I know that H here, this first part is the living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms to the side. So this is a dynamic process with a lot of elements: entering, staying, moving, staying, going, staying, leaving. Okay, you can put the dot. Some people, when you put 15 minutes there, you don't need to put the dot. You know that means that you stay there for 15 minutes, right? So for example, here it says, it's an example. I enter the house, went to the living room for 15 minutes. I can even say, and I watched TV for 15 minutes. And then went to my bedroom. I read a book. You can write here book if you want to, for 20 minutes, and then went to the kitchen and had a sandwich, and then left at 3:50 through the rear door. Lots of things can be actually placed here, or there's a lot of stuff that you can simplify, a lot of words that can be simplified. so that you don't need to write a lot. And this is the bottom line is not writing a lot. That's what we want. We don't want, we certainly do not want to write a lot when we are taking notes. That's our main goal at all times. That's our main goal. So let's see if we can implement something like this in one of our examples using what, before we even go to the app. So let's just look at that, okay? So let's say that I have a situation where the original is as follows. The police came into the house at 3 p.m. with guns. They stayed in the living room for 10 minutes and then they went to a bedroom looking for John. Then they went to the kitchen for about 10 minutes and left through their rear door at 3:30 p.m. Look at all the information that I have here. And much better than writing it down. I don't even dare to write it down. It will take me a long time. So basically what it says, we are in the domain, in the column for the police, right? But I identify the fact that it says enter the house. And you know, how do you know that this box should be used? The question will tell you. So for example, let's say that the question in English is, please, can you tell us what did the police do when they entered the house on November 10, 2020? So you know that the answer is going to say, well, the police entered the house at 3 p.m. They may not even say the police. But they said they entered the house at 3 p.m. with guns, stayed in the living room for 10 minutes, went to the bedroom looking for John, and then went to the kitchen and stayed there for 10 minutes and left at 3:30 through the rear door. Wow, that's impressive to remember that sequence of events. If you were to have to write it down, it would be almost impossible to have such level of accuracy. And that's the use of it. You can always write it if you want to write the words. Not advisable. Not advisable at all. Let me look at another example. You can say, for example, something like this. Let me think here. I love to buy TVs. So I went to the Best Buy that is located at the corner of First and Vermont. I went into the Best Buy located at the corner of First and Vermont, and then I stayed there for about 45 minutes and ended up buying a TV. I don't know, something to that effect. So I love buying TVs. So I went to the Best Buy located at the corner of First and Vermont, and then stay in there for 45 minutes, and then I ended up buying a TV. That's one way to do this. In fact, there is actually a better way, but we'll talk about it in a second. Uh, that's a pretty good option. Now you may say, well, here we have the option of only being static, because if we didn't have the location, then I could have, if there was no location, I could have said, if it had been, I love to buy TVs, so I went to the 7-Eleven store, I mean the 7, God, I went to the Best Buy store and stayed there 45 minutes, and then I walked out with bought a TV. That would have been the notes for it. But the fact that I indicated the address, that created a little bit of a problem for me. So it made me write more because of the fact that I couldn't use the dynamic approach. But there is a trick to that. Any auxiliary things that are actually used in regards to this box, any auxiliary things can be written to the right or to the left of the box. In other words, I can do something like this. Let me show you. So I love to buy TVs, okay? So we're fine there, right? So I went to the Best Buy store located at the corner of First and Vermont and stayed there for 45 minutes. Then I walked out with a TV, walk out of the store with a TV. You can see this information here, I don't know if it's clear, is information that pertains to that box. So you know that when you read this, you're going to start with the arrow always. So, and you know that this is a kind of additional information. So these are notes for this box. So you will say, I went into the Best Buy store, located at the first corner of First and Vermont, and stayed there for 45 minutes. The sequence has to be, you have to kind of remember the sequence from using your short-term memory. So that's the only disadvantage of it, see? Because when you say you do this, 45 minutes, you write Best Buy, and then you just put First and Vermont here. There could be a possibility for some of you that the sequence is not very clear in your mind. It depends on your short-term memory. To me, it's very clear that if it says I here, I'm going to start from the beginning of the arrow. So I enter the 7-Eleven store. I keep using 7-Eleven. I enter the Best Buy store, and I wouldn't say I stay there for 45 minutes at the corner of First and Vermont, because then First and Vermont wouldn't correspond to Best Buy. So the fact that it's here, I know that it means I enter the Best Buy store located at the corner of First and Vermont and stay there for 45 minutes. And I can't even go this way. And then I walked up with 3 TVs. This is the arrow. Walk out through the rear door if you want to. Now, if you want to walk out through the main door, then I put it right here. So the arrows are the things that are actually giving you direction, and somehow they are giving you also the sequence. So why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? And then I'm going to show you another method if you feel that this is a little bit too complex. If you feel that the fact that you write to the right of this creates a problem. Some people may say, wait a minute, let's say that we have a situation like this. Let's see. So I, blah, blah, and John, blah, blah. And now I want to say I, blah, Best Buy, corner of First Vermont. Doesn't it, it's something that kind of interferes with the column for John. Well, the rule that you always have to keep in mind is that whenever you have a box, whatever is written to the right of the box doesn't belong to anybody here on my phone. It's just my little app, and that's the app for the box. Okay, so that's the thing to remember. All right, so get some paper and let's see how it goes. I'm going to dictate it and I'm going to take notes at the same time so that I can show you the examples. So go ahead and be ready to take notes. Okay, so here we go.